Welcome to Falcon TV. Subscribe to the channel to stay informed and inspire us.
Just over 20 years after the end of World War I, global war erupted again in 1939 and continued until 1945. This Second World War was the most extensive and lethal conflict in history, involving over 30 nations and ending with over 60 million deaths. The immense destruction and trauma of two world wars within a generation largely stemmed from the unstable settlements and unresolved rivalries following World War I, combined with new nationalist and authoritarian movements that rose to power during the 1930s. Several key factors set the stage for another global eruption of violence on the heels of the First World War. Political and economic disorder in Germany. Germany was in disarray following its defeat in 1918. The peace terms of the Treaty of Versailles imposed significant territorial losses, reparations, demilitarization, and admission of war guilt upon Germany. This humiliation, combined with post-war political turmoil, civil conflict, violent communist and socialist uprisings, hyperinflation, and economic depression, served to deeply destabilize Germany during the 1920s and early 1930s. Right-wing nationalist movements like the Nazis were able to exploit widespread bitterness and desperation. In 1933, Adolf Hitler became chancellor and quickly consolidated absolute power through police repression and abolishing democracy. He immediately began secretly rearming Germany and planning to expand the Reich's borders through conquest, in violation of Versailles terms. A rearmed and authoritarian Germany under a ruthlessly expansionist Nazi regime would go on to threaten European stability. Appeasement and failure to maintain alliances. Initially, leaders of Britain, France, and the United States hoped to maintain peace through accommodating some of Hitler's demands. They were also hesitant to intervene due to bitter memories of World War I's horrific toll. But this appeasement only enabled Hitler's ambitions and violated the principles of collective security envisioned by the League of Nations founded in 1920. When Germany remilitarized its Rhineland border region with France in 1936, reclaimed the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia in 1938, and seized the rest of Czechoslovakia in 1939, the policy of appeasement failed to deter Hitler's aggression. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain infamously announced "peace for our time" after giving in to Hitler's demands. But within a year, full-blown war had erupted. The League of Nations was intended to uphold stability through collective security pacts, but the United States never joined and the League could not enforce disarmament. Its credibility was weakened further as Britain and France instead made concessions to the aggressors. If the Allies had presented a strong united front earlier, Hitler may have been contained. Rise of Italian fascism and Imperial Japan. Two other totalitarian powers would join with Hitler's Germany to form the Axis military alliance in 1940. Fascist Italy under Benito Mussolini and Imperial Japan ruled by Emperor Hirohito. Like Germany, Italy had felt short-changed by the territorial spoils after World War I. Italian nationalism and bitter war veterans provided a foundation for Mussolini's fascist dictatorship, which rose to power in 1922 and envisioned recreating a new Roman Empire. Imperial Japan also embraced authoritarian military leadership and ultranationalism during the 1930s while invading Manchuria and parts of China to expand its sphere of influence. Had the Western democracies and League of Nations strongly opposed these acts of aggression earlier, it could have deterred cooperation between the Axis dictators. But inconsistent policies emboldened both Italy and Japan's appetite for conquest. Failure of international cooperation. The ruins of World War I had led to some noble goals like the League of Nations, Washington Naval Conference on Disarmament, and the Kellogg-Briand Pact to outlaw aggressive war. But ultimately self-interest prevailed over collective security. The League excluded defeated powers, the US never joined, and sanctioning proved ineffective against aggressors. Naval disarmament also failed as Japan refused to extend restrictions. France constructed the huge Maginot Line of border fortifications rather than reinforce the German Rhineland as a buffer. Britain internally divided between pacifists and conservatives like Winston Churchill, who warned of the growing threat from Germany. International cooperation faltered, allowing Hitler to bully his neighbors one by one without unified opposition. Rise of totalitarian ideologies. The volatile social and economic turmoil of the 1920s and 1930s disrupted Europe's democratic order, allowing for extremist movements. Benito Mussolini initiated fascism in Italy, asserting one-party dictatorship, militarism, and ultranationalism to restore glory. In Germany, Hitler's Nazi Party promoted racial supremacy, state terror, dictatorship, and demanded German territorial expansion goals Hitler relentlessly pursued once in power. Japan's military leaders in the 1930s promoted a ruthless imperialist agenda for the Yamato race, modeling itself after European fascism. These totalitarian ideologies unleashed aggressive major powers that pursued radical ethno-nationalist aims of domination, trampling over bodies of international law and norms of democracy. Allowing fascism and Nazism to fester rather than uniting to restrain their ideology ultimately led to World War II. The policy of appeasement. During the mid-1930s, key European and world powers like Britain, France, and the United States pursued a policy of appeasement towards the aggression of Germany, Italy, and Japan. This approach stemmed from a popular desire to avoid another calamitous war, often backed by pacifism or isolationism. Appeasement was intended to maintain peace by satisfying the expansionist aims of dictators. Major concessions were made, such as allowing Germany's remilitarization of the Rhineland, Italy's annexation of Ethiopia, and the accession of Austria and Czechoslovakia to an ever-growing Third Reich. But appeasement projected weakness, emboldened Hitler's demands, and enabled significant military buildup. By 1939, Hitler felt confident enough to invade Poland and spark war with the Western Allies. Geostrategic balances of power. The imperial powers of Britain, France, Russia, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire had dominated geostrategic balances within Europe and with colonies abroad prior to World War I. But the First World War and subsequent civil wars within Russia and the Ottoman collapse disrupted this old equilibrium. Meanwhile, defeated Germany remained a major power, while the United States and Japan emerged onto the global stage. This made for a fragile and complex European balance of power. Former Imperial Russia gave way to the Soviet Union under Stalin after the Russian Revolution, creating tensions between communist and capitalist states. These fragile geostrategic balances enabled opportunistic aggression by powers like Hitler's Germany seeking to redraw the map in their favor. With no single power exerting stable hegemony, it became easier for ambitious dictators to pursue sudden conquests. Unresolved grievances after World War I. World War I concluded in 1918 with the Treaty of Versailles, negotiated amongst victorious Britain, France, and the US, but overall it created a fragile peace, not resolving dangerous tensions left brewing across Europe and Asia. Harsh terms were imposed on Germany, and some say the country was not effectively reconciled, creating feelings of resentment. Italy had hoped for more territorial spoils after World War I, leading to nationalist grievances. Japan emerged more powerful from World War I but still aggrieved by Western colonial racism. New unstable states were carved out of former empires like Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia, drawn along contested lines. Ethnic conflicts persisted between Poles and Germans, Hungarians and Slavs, Turks and Greeks. Finally, no effective collective security emerged from the League of Nations to enforce disarmament, settle disputes, and check rogue states. This failure to establish a stable post-war order or address tensions in a lasting way allowed rivalries to intensify again during the interwar period. In many respects, World War II can be seen as an extension of unresolved issues from World War I and its flawed peace settlement. Countries like Germany, Italy, and Japan harbored grievances against the geopolitical order and allied to overturn it. Meanwhile, the victorious powers like Britain, France, and the US failed to buttress international stability through strong alliances or institutions that could deter aggression until it was too late. Appeasement and isolationism gave way to opportunism by totalitarian regimes. But the immense destruction of World War II finally convinced the Allies that lasting peace required reconciliation, shared security, rebuilt economies, and enduring cooperation between nations. The post-war order formed through the United Nations and economic integration set the stage for 7 decades of relative global peace, proving that collaboration between nations is always superior to fractious rivalry and aggression.
If you liked this video, please subscribe to the channel and give a thumbs up. Thank you.